Marrying her, means you get all sisters, ready or not. The soft chime of the loan terminal was the last, gentle blow to Mason's hopes. His debt, now displayed in glaring red, was unpayable. He'd once been the Commonwealth's top systems architect, but speaking against their corruption had cost him everything. Now he was finished. Across the glass desk, the Verdani legal automaton, an iridescent projection, hummed quietly. Indenture is your only remaining recourse, applicant Mason. All other lines of credit are closed. He stared at the terminal's unblinking numbers. The world seemed to narrow to the sterile office, the faint scent of ozone, and the impossibly cold voice. Mason's throat tightened. No other options? The automaton's golden irises flickered. All avenues have been exhausted. The terms remain. Assume marriage to House Verdani's eldest, and all debts are extinguished. Rejection results in asset seizure and involuntary labor assignment. The words twisted inside him. Marriage as transaction. Indenture disguised as alliance. Yet, behind the automaton, the shimmering contract scrolled. Clauses, subclauses, signatures of men and women who'd gambled everything and lost. Mason's jaw clenched. Show me the core terms. A new screen unfurled. There it was. Marital union with Lysara, first scion of House Verdani, full transfer of obligations, immediate effect. Passage required to flagship Aurora's wake, Trion Delta system, by end of cycle. He tried to recall pride or hope, anything but the numb, gnawing sense of defeat. I'll sign, he managed, his voice hollow as the echo of a lost life. He pressed his thumb to the pad. The contract responded with a soft chime, and suddenly the debt vanished, replaced by a single phrase. Contract enacted. Report to flagship Aurora's wake, Trion Delta system, end of cycle. The journey blurred. His world shrank to cramped quarters, the stale air of cut-rate shuttles, the passing flicker of indifferent faces in ports that seemed to all blend into one. His only luggage, a battered duffel, the few tools he'd managed to keep, and the weight of what he'd done. Sleep eluded him, chased away by looping thoughts of everything he'd lost, everything he was about to gamble. By the time he arrived at Trion Delta, exhaustion was a familiar companion. The Aurora's wake loomed in the docking bay, a vessel whose vast, aging hull bore the faded sigils of its house. Once, it had shone with ambition. Now, light played across dulled plating and pitted steel, its glory a memory. An attendant in sleek Verdani livery met him, all polite detachment and hurried gestures. He was whisked through echoing corridors, past silent crew members who appraised him with fleeting, curious glances. Soon, the doors slid open to reveal the command lounge. It was a chamber of authority, the floor ringed with consoles and a great star map rotating in the center, a living tapestry of shifting light. Before it stood a tall, willowy figure, her back to him. At his entrance, she turned and Mason's stride faltered. Her skin was radiant chlorophyll green, as though sunlight moved beneath its surface. A mane of crimson hair tumbled down her back, wild and untamed, and golden eyes regarded him, framed by shifting dark markings at her temples. Ears, elegantly pointed, twitched as she assessed him. But it was the fire in her gaze, cool, crystalline, and unwavering, that rooted him to the spot. Applicant Mason, she said, her voice ringing through the lounge, clear and cold. You are here. He matched her gaze, refusing to look away. The contract required my arrival at this hour. Her eyes slid over him, cataloging the rough hands, the worn jacket with patches of old solder and faded insignia. Something like disappointment flickered at the corner of her mouth. I am Lysara. By agreement, we are now joined. My family's debt is yours, and the syndicate now holds your own. Mason nodded, masking his fatigue behind a mask of neutrality. A new beginning for us both, he offered. Lysara's smile was brittle, the edge of a blade. You misunderstand, human. This is not a partnership of convenience. It is a union born of necessity, and you have not only married me. She gestured to the shadowed recesses of the lounge. From the darkness, three figures emerged, each bearing echoes of Lysara's beauty, yet distinct in their own alien way. The first was lithe and sinuous, her skin a dazzling emerald, hair the same living green as new leaves. Eyes glimmered with mischief and sharpness, her stance feline and restless. The second towered above the others, statuesque and imposing, her skin a deep cobalt blue. Silver-threaded hair cascaded over her shoulders, and she carried herself with unshakable calm, presence alone promising authority, and perhaps danger. The third was petite, almost delicate, her lilac skin glowing under the map's shifting lights. Indigo eyes, piercing and analytical, flickered over Mason with a silent, relentless calculation. Every movement radiated intelligence, poised as though already anticipating the next 10 steps. The Verdani bond is all-encompassing, Lysara continued, her voice flat as a judge's gavel. By joining with the eldest, you join the house. You are now bound to all of us, and the fate of our crumbling dynasty. Welcome, Mason. Silence pressed in, thick and unyielding. Mason forced himself to meet each gaze. He saw suspicion, derision, wariness, a cold assessment of a stranger who had arrived as their salvation. In that moment, he recognized the roles: the pilot, the tactician, the economist, the matriarch. His wives, by law, if not by choice. It was the green-haired one who finally broke the tension, stepping forward with the predatory grace of a stalking cat. So this is the grand fix, Lysara. A backwater tech from a dirt world. Her voice dripped disdain, every word a challenge. The lilac-skinned woman didn't move, but her tone was precise, cutting. He's all we could afford? She studied Mason as if weighing his very molecules. His indenture will barely cover the Delta 9 interest this term. The blue-skinned giant simply watched, arms folded, face impassive. But her gaze promised swift reprisal if he failed, no words needed. Mason stood his ground, unflinching. He was used to being underestimated, dismissed. The memory of every closed door, every sneer from those who thought him broken, gave him steel. He spoke, voice low but firm. The contract grants me executive authority. That includes oversight of all Verdani assets. I'll start with an inspection of the flagship's core systems. The green-haired Syrah snorted, a smirk twisting her lips. You want to look at our drive? Our tech is centuries ahead of yours. Mason shrugged, a wry edge to his answer. Then I'll learn something. He turned to Lysara. I'll need full access, and your chief engineer's cooperation. Lysara hesitated, golden eyes searching his face for a trace of bravado or deceit. But the contract was binding, every clause a chain around both their fates. With a curt nod, she conceded. Do as he says, she commanded. And as the star map's light rippled across their faces, Mason realized the first real move had been made. The Aurora's Wake's engine bay was a cathedral of alien alloys and humming conduits. Shafts of blue light sliced through the shifting haze, illuminating a labyrinth of machinery both graceful and severe, Verdani craftwork, all elegance and cold precision. To the untrained eye, it was a marvel. To Mason, it was a map of wasted potential. He paced slowly, eyes cataloging every detail. The thrum of the core was steady but muted, like a heart not quite at full strength. Panels ran warm, their seams betraying the telltale shimmer of power loss. He pressed his palm to a coolant pipe, feeling the vibration beneath his skin, brow furrowed. The chief engineer, Drav, watched him with undisguised suspicion. Drav's jade skin was marked with the scars of 1,000 repairs, his presence broad and imposing beside Mason's spare frame. The core is a marvel, It doesn't need Terran meddling, he said, voice thick with pride and challenge. Mason kept his gaze on the readout, fingers dancing over the console. It's running at 60%, he replied. Your plasma injectors are out of sync by at least 15 degrees. That's energy bleeding into heat, not thrust. This is a furnace, not a starship. Drav's nostrils flared. You presume much for an indentured man. Verdani engineering is beautiful, but not infallible. Mason turned, his tone even but resolute. Show me your smallest shuttle. I'll show you what Terran improvisation can do. Drav glared, the challenge hanging in the air like a gauntlet thrown. After a heartbeat, he spat a string of Verdani curses and gestured for the junior techs to clear the way. For 2 cycles, Mason became a fixture in the shuttle bay. The space, usually echoing with the discipline of Verdani crews, now rang with the staccato clatter of Terran tools and the sharp scent of ozone. He scavenged with practiced efficiency, hauling old circuit boards, scrap power cells, and fragments of his own battered gear. Each piece was weighed, repurposed, or discarded with merciless logic. He worked stripped to the waist, skin streaked with grease and sweat, the jagged scar along his right shoulder visible for all to see. His hands were precise, always moving. The shuttle, a compact Verdani transport barely used, became his canvas. Verdani techs watched with a mixture of horror and curiosity as he yanked out the delicate primary injector, replacing it with a boxy Terran assembly bristling with heat sinks and rebalanced plasma taps. It was ugly by their standards, all sharp lines and exposed welds. He tuned every component for raw power, not aesthetic. Bypass regulators, thermal relays, he pushed the system to the ragged edge, trusting in his own calculations. When he finished, the shuttle looked like a hybrid beast, part gleaming Verdani, part rugged Terran, every panel humming with potential. On the 3rd cycle, Syrah arrived in the bay, impatience stamped on her sharp features. She wore her flight harness like a second skin, green hair pulled back in a severe knot. So human, she drawled, eyeing the modified shuttle. If this crate blows, my sisters will make you pay. Mason grinned, wiping oil from his brow. Just try not to break the speed limit. She snorted, but something in his confidence made her hesitate. Syrah climbed into the cockpit, fingers flying over the controls, a flicker of nerves masked by bravado. The bay cleared, all eyes on the launch doors. Engines whined. The deck shook. Mason stood beside Drav, arms folded, heart thudding. The shuttle roared to life, raw, explosive acceleration tearing through the silence. Syrah whooped, the sound wild and unrestrained, as the craft leapt forward, streaking out into the void. The calm crackled with her laughter, for once free of disdain. On the bridge, Lysara and her sisters clustered around the sensor displays. Rynell's fingers danced over the data streams, eyes wide as numbers rolled in. Kalis, usually inscrutable, leaned forward, lips parted in surprise. Syrah brought the shuttle back on a knife-edge arc, engines screaming. She stormed onto the bridge, cheeks flushed, and slapped the datapad down on the console. Check the logs. Rynell's eyes widened as she scrolled. Acceleration curves off the charts, sublight to terminal in less than 3.4 seconds. Energy conversion is... She looked up, stunned. It's efficient. Kalis arched an eyebrow, arms still folded, but the tightness around her eyes softened. Lysara's grip on the console tightened imperceptibly. She said nothing, but her gaze lingered on Mason as he entered, sweat-soaked and unbowed. That night, Mason lingered in the engine bay, stripped to the waist, lost in the hum of the core. The faint blue glow played over the planes of his shoulders, throwing shadows across the deck. The day's triumph buzzed in his mind, but he could not shake the sense of looming threat, like the calm before a new storm. He did not hear Lysara at first. She watched him from the threshold, a nutrient ration in her hands, hesitation flickering in her golden eyes. He was no longer just the indentured human. He was a mystery now, a force that had altered the very orbit of her world. She stepped forward, voice quiet. "You should eat." He turned, surprised, but not unfriendly. "Thank you." She approached, the silence charged. Their fingers brushed as she handed him the bowl, a spark leaping between them, bright and undeniable. His eyes flicked to her lips, then to her eyes, searching for something unspoken. She held his gaze. "You surprised us." "Wasn't trying to impress," Mason replied softly. "Just trying to keep us flying." The air thickened with the pulse of the core, the mechanical heartbeat a counterpoint to their own. For a moment, the arrangement's coldness cracked, warmth seeping through. Lysara lingered, torn between duty and something more fragile. "I'll see you at first shift," she murmured, voice softer than before. She left him to his thoughts, but her absence lingered. The shuttle's triumph echoed through the crew. Where before there had been dismissive glances and muttered jokes, now there were whispers of curiosity. Crewmen eyed Mason as he passed, the word Terran no longer an insult but a question. Syrah watched him with new interest, her usual sneer replaced by an appraising smirk. Rhinel's calculations began to include his ideas, her questions sharp and probing. Kalis remained distant, but even she lingered longer on the bridge when Mason was near. And Lysara found herself drawn to the engine room, always with an excuse, never quite able to stay away. But the fragile new order shattered 2 days before their next delivery. Without warning, the Aurora's wake lurched. The deck pitched, sending Mason stumbling against a bulkhead. Alarms blared, a shrill chorus that set every nerve on edge. Lysara's voice snapped over the intercom. "Report!" a junior tech shouted, panic in his tone. "Primary drive failure. We're drifting." On the bridge, chaos reigned. Syrah slammed her fists against the navigation console, teeth bared. "Worse, we're heading into the Corin maelstrom. The gravitic tides will tear us apart." The star map flickered, lines of code crawling across the main display, strange, recursive, looping. Mason's blood ran cold as he recognized the pattern. Their rival, Director Voss, had made his move. He strode onto the bridge, calm amid the chaos. Crew scattered from his path, drawn by the certainty in his stride. Mason's gaze swept the displays, fingers flying across the controls, dismissing one error after another until he reached the heart of the code. "This isn't just a drive failure," he said, voice cutting through the din. "There's a logic trap in the nav. A Terran trick. I designed this for Commonwealth covert ops." Stunned silence. Even the air seemed to pause. The sisters stared at him, eyes widened in shock, and something like fear. Mason stood at the heart of the storm, no longer a debtor, but a weapon. Kalis's voice was sharp, slicing through the tension. "You were military?" Mason nodded, gaze steady. "I was. Lead architect for the Helios Initiative. I spoke out. They buried me in debt." He glanced at the star map, watching the simulated drift toward the maelstrom's whirling maw. Voss didn't just want to ruin them, he wanted them destroyed. Mason took charge, his voice slicing through the chaos on the bridge. "Seal the bridge," he ordered. Kalis didn't hesitate. She spun to the control panel, her cobalt hands moving with precision, and slammed her palm down. The doors groaned shut, locking out the frantic shouts from the corridor. Mason swept his gaze over the sisters, their faces tense but focused. "Syrah," he barked. "I need real-time grav readings. Rhinel, be ready to crash Voss's shares the second we escape. Lysara, with me in engineering. We'll have to push the core past safe limits. Trust me." Syrah, still wild-eyed from the sudden lurch into disaster, gave a sharp nod and dropped into the pilot's chair, hands flying over the controls. "Lave feed on all 3 axes, Mason. If we slip even a second, we're paced." Rhinel pulled up her market interface, the cool glow of the screen reflected in her indigo eyes. "Ready on the trigger," she murmured, her voice tight. If we survive this, Voss is going to bleed. Kalis took her place near the security terminal, scanning for sabotage. I'll watch for any further code injections, she growled, her stance like a coiled spring. Lysara hesitated for only a heartbeat, then matched Mason's stride out of the bridge. They ran side by side, boots hammering against trembling deck plates as the Aurora's wake shuddered under the maelstrom's pull. The alarms were deafening now, red lights strobed over the corridor's curved walls. Mason's mind raced ahead, assembling and reassembling possibilities. In engineering, klaxons howled like banshees. The core's containment rings glowed a sickly yellow, vibrating with dangerous harmonics. Plasma arcs spat from overworked relays. Techs scrambled to stay out of the way. Mason shoved through the chaos, Lysara tight behind him. "Reroute all auxiliary power to the main injector grid," Mason shouted, voice hoarse. "Purge non-essential systems. Prepare for a full surge override." The engineering crew stared, uncertain, but Lysara's voice snapped them into motion. "Do as he says," she commanded, her authority ironclad. The engineers scattered, hands flying to their stations. Mason yanked open a maintenance panel, the heat stinging his fingers. He reached for a set of manual overrides, slamming them into place. "The logic trap blocks a safe restart," he explained to Lysara as he worked. "But if we trigger a plasma surge inside the containment field, timed perfectly with the next gravity wave, it'll sling us out of the maelstrom. The field will act as a slingshot if we don't vaporize first." "That's madness," Lysara whispered, her knuckles white on his arm as she steadied herself against a shuddering bulkhead. He looked up, gray eyes burning with resolve, sweat streaking his brow. "I need you to believe in me." She met his gaze, her mask slipping for an instant to reveal the raw fear beneath, and something more. "I do," she breathed, barely more than a whisper. A tremor ran through the deck, nearly knocking them off their feet. The core's energy levels spiked, the readouts shifting from yellow to angry red. Mason grabbed the emergency purge lever, Lysara's hand atop his, her grip steadying his. Their eyes locked, a silent understanding passing between them. On the bridge, Syrah's voice crackled over the comm. "We're at the edge, Mason. One more wave and we're done." "On my mark!" Mason called back. He watched the gravimeter's wild swing, timing the surge down to the heartbeat. 3, 2, 1, now! He and Lysara yanked the purge lever together. For a single, endless moment, silence swallowed everything. Then the world exploded in blinding emerald light. The Aurora's wake howled as the core vented, force rippling through the ship. Mason and Lysara braced themselves, the concussive energy nearly tearing them from their feet. The core's scream peaked, then, impossibly, stabilized. The warning lights shifted from red to green. A tremor ran through the hull as the ship bucked, then surged forward, flung from the maelstrom's edge like a stone from a sling. On the bridge, Syrah let out a ragged cheer, her hands dancing across the controls as she pulled the ship out of the spin. Renelle's eyes were enormous as she watched the stars settle on the viewscreen. Kalis released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They'd done the impossible. Mason collapsed to the deck, chest heaving, every muscle burning with exhaustion and adrenaline. Lysara knelt beside him, her face flushed, hair wild and eyes shining with a mixture of awe and fierce longing. She cupped his cheek, fingers trembling. "I didn't think anyone could do that," she whispered. The words hung between them, heavy with new meaning. In the engine room's heat and danger, something real had taken root. Trust, respect, and a dangerous attraction. Around them, the crew erupted in cheers. The Aurora limped away from the maelstrom, battered but alive. The ship's hull bore fresh scars, but the spirit of her crew soared higher than ever. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Renelle's fingers flew across her market interface. She initiated Mason's plan in a blur of motion, shorting Voss's shares, selling off the Auroras at rock-bottom prices. News of the loss spread like wildfire, their stock plummeted, and Voss's climbed. She waited, eyes fixed on the data. The instant the Aurora's wake broadcast her survival, the market spasmed. Rhinell reversed course, buying up their own shares as Voss's portfolio collapsed. The numbers soared. A fortune rolled in, the lifeblood the syndicate had been starving for. Kalis, meanwhile, took Mason's covert knowledge and turned it loose on the ship's internal systems. She traced encrypted transmissions, hunted down every backdoor Voss had installed, and routed out his spies one by one. For the first time, the sisters struck back, not just surviving, but fighting. The aftermath was a quiet revolution. The crew watched Mason with new eyes. Contempt faded, replaced by respect and curiosity. The sisters, each in their way, shifted in orbit around him. Kalis confronted him first, challenging him to sparring in the grav gym. The room spun in zero gravity, mats floating, lights low. She was merciless, all taut muscle and iron will. Their bodies tangled, breaths mingling, each move a contest of strength and strategy. She pinned him hard, her lips inches from his ear. "Not bad, Terran," she murmured, her breath hot. "But next time, don't hold back." He grinned up at her, pulse racing. "I didn't." They broke apart, laughter and adrenaline fizzing in the air. A new intimacy forged in sweat and bruises. Evenings, Rhinell began to meet Mason in the wardroom, datapads stacked between mugs of strong Verdani tea. Their debates over market moves and risk strategies grew sharper, banter electric with unspoken promise. "You're reckless," Rhinell accused, blue light dancing in her eyes. "You're calculating," Mason retorted, savoring the spark. She smiled, slow and genuine. "That's why we're dangerous together." Through it all, Syrah watched him with a hunter's focus. Her disdain had transformed to curiosity, and sometimes something warmer. She'd drop by the engine bay, tossing a wrench in his direction. "Still think Terran tech's better?" she'd tease. He'd catch it, smirking. "Only when you're not flying it." Lysara, for her part, found herself drawn to him at odd hours, excuses thin, curiosity genuine. The barrier between obligation and desire had fractured. She lingered in engineering, listening as he explained Terran theory or worked with her to tune the core, her hand sometimes resting on his as if by accident, her golden gaze intent. The contract was now the axis of Mason's life. He was at the center of a web connecting four remarkable women, each brilliant, each dangerous, each alluring in her own way. What began as survival had become something else entirely, a new kind of family, born in fire and forged by the impossible. Mason's days blurred together in a relentless rhythm, hands stained with coolant and plasma by day, mind whirring with calculations and schematics, and evenings caught in the intricate orbit of four wives, each drawing him in her own unpredictable gravity. Kalis demanded his focus in the grav gym, sparring until both were breathless, sweat glistening on cobalt skin and human brow. Their matches were battles and dances, bodies locked in challenge and fierce camaraderie. Sometimes Kalis would pin him and grin, her challenge clear: fight harder, think faster. Rhinell drew him to the ship's data core, her mind a whirlwind of algorithms and stock indices. They hunched over displays, debating risk and strategy, fingers flying over keys in the dim blue light. Their conversations were sharp, sometimes biting, but always edged with respect. "The syndicate won't survive on strength alone," she warned. "We need every credit." Syrah kept him on edge at the helm. She'd challenge his calls on the bridge, question his numbers, scoff at his suggested maneuvers, until, when pressed, she'd break into a sharp-toothed grin and execute his command with impossible grace. Her laughter echoed through the command deck, defiant and alive. But it was Lysara who became his constant, a quiet anchor amid the storm. Their shared meals became a ritual. She brought dishes from Verdana, the plates arranged with geometric precision, colors vivid and strange. She watched his reaction with a pride that bordered on vulnerability. Mason, in turn, described Earth, city lights shimmering in the rain, the taste of real coffee, the ache of distant thunder. He painted pictures of oceans and night skies, of the hum of neon above crowded streets. Lysara responded with stories of her own, the crystal jungles of Verdana, where the leaves chimed in the wind and the air shimmered with motes of bioluminescence. She spoke of the weight of legacy, of expectations that pressed down like a mountain. Over time, their words grew less guarded. A warmth crept in, something fragile and genuine. One night, everything changed. Mason was in the engine bay, coaxing a reluctant plasma relay into alignment. The system coughed, then spat a burst of searing energy. He jerked back, pain lancing up his arm as raw heat seared his skin. Before he could catch his breath, Lysara was there, urgency etched in every line of her face. She pushed him onto a crate, her movements brisk but gentle. "Hold still," she said, her voice trembling just enough for him to hear the fear beneath. She tore open a medkit, her hands steady as she cleaned the wound. Her touch lingered, careful yet intimate, her crimson hair brushing his cheek as she bent close. The scent of her, floral and wild, filled his senses. After she finished dressing the burn, her thumb traced the edge of his wrist, the gesture soft and questioning. For a long moment, she simply looked at him, golden eyes dark with something unnamed. "You're reckless," she murmured, her breath a caress on his skin. He caught her gaze, his own voice rough. "I get results." A smile tugged at her lips, equal parts exasperation and something softer. She let her gaze fall to his mouth, then back up to his eyes. The air between them thickened, charged with weeks of tension and longing. Her face inched closer, the line between duty and desire blurring. Then, at the last second, she pulled away, the mask of command slipping back into place. But the boundary had been crossed. Something fundamental had shifted. The indenture was dead. In its place, something deeper was taking root. The peace didn't last. Their final test came not in the quiet of the engine room, but on the galactic stage. Director Voss, vindictive, cunning, and wounded by their recent victories, issued a formal challenge: control of the Trion Delta Trade Corridor, decided by a sector-wide spectacle. The trial would be broadcast to every major house, a race and combat trial through the deadly asteroid belt at the system's edge. On the bridge, the sisters gathered, tension thick in the air. Rhinel's eyes flicked over the data feeds. "Our ships are old," she warned, voice clipped. "Even the Aurora's wake isn't built for this. Voss's fleet is new. Their drives—" Mason stood at the star map, the challenge burning in his chest. He smiled, slow and confident. "Accept. The Aurora's wake will answer." Syrah's head snapped up, incredulous. One ship against his fleet? Her green hair flared as she spun to face him, disbelief on every line of her face. "One is enough," Mason replied, voice steady as stone. Preparation became obsession. The ship's corridors filled with the clang of tools and the buzz of voices. Mason and Drav tore out the old core, hands working in perfect sync, Verdani elegance and Terran brute force melding into something new. They installed a hybrid Terran-Verdani drive, ugly, powerful, unpredictable. The crew worked around the clock, sweat and hope binding them together. Kalis drilled the defense teams, her commands crisp and unyielding. Syrah ran simulation after simulation, pushing herself to the edge of exhaustion, every maneuver faster and riskier. Rhinel coordinated supplies and ran interference on the market, making certain their rivals couldn't sabotage them before the race even began. Lysara walked the decks, her presence a steadying force, but at night she lingered outside engineering, watching Mason work, their conversations growing quieter and more intimate. When race day arrived, the Aurora's wake gleamed beneath the lights of 1,000 ships. The system's asteroid belt was crowded with spectators, merchant vessels, house flagships, pirate cruisers, even Commonwealth scouts, all hungry for spectacle. Voss's fleet, sleek, armed, arrogant, lined up in formation, the director himself broadcasting taunts across the local comms. Inside the command lounge, Mason moved to his station, every sense focused. Lysara stood at his side, her hand always near his, close enough to brush. Syrah took her place at the helm, eyes narrowed, every muscle coiled. Kalis monitored the defense grid, ready to counter any trick Voss threw their way. Rhinell coordinated on comms, her voice already firm as she relayed updates. The crew snapped to their posts. On the main display, Voss's ships flashed their running lights, mocking and aggressive. The betting pools spiked. No one expected the battered Aurora to last a quarter circuit. Rhinell's voice broke the tension, cool and precise. "They're mocking us. Odds are 10 to 1 against." She glanced at Mason, eyes searching. Mason met Lysara's eyes. Trust, old and new, sparked between them. She nodded, her expression calm, unyielding, a silent promise. Together, they would see this through, no matter the odds. The race began. The Aurora's hybrid core unleashed a torrent of power, and the battered ship surged forward with a roar that reverberated through every deck. For a heartbeat, the spectators gasped, certain the ancient vessel would tear itself apart. Instead, she leapt ahead, leaving Voss's gleaming fleet in her ion trail. The belt's asteroids glittered like knives, shifting in unpredictable patterns. But Syrah's hands were steady on the helm, knuckles white, eyes sharp. Mason's voice rang over the comms, cool and certain. "Heading 337, Syrah. Thread the corridor on my mark." He sent calculations streaming to her console, complex vectors, micro-adjustments, the kind of moves that took both audacity and trust. Syrah grinned, wild and exultant. "Copy. Hold tight, everyone." Behind them, the Voss ships scrambled to catch up, their engines flaring bright as they closed ranks, intent on crowding the Aurora out. One peeled off, seeking an inside line, but Mason had anticipated the move. "Asteroid shift, 20 meters starboard. Syrah, drift to port, now." The Aurora pivoted on thrusters, the hull groaning as she skimmed an ice-streaked rock. A heartbeat later, the Voss interceptor clipped the asteroid, spiraling out in a shower of debris. Gasps echoed over the comms from the crowd of spectators. Voss's command ship flickered with angry signals. Kalis's voice snapped over the channel, sharp and alert. "Second target closing, port quarter." "Looks like they're trying to box us in." Syrah's eyes danced, adrenaline surging. "Let them try." Mason leaned over her shoulder, calm amid the chaos. "Remember, use their own momentum. Feed them a path they want, then close the door." Syrah nodded. She veered just enough to invite pursuit, then cut hard across a cluster of tumbling rocks. The pursuing Voss ship mirrored her. Too late. A massive asteroid spun into its path, the ship's shields flared, then vanished in a blossom of blue fire. Rhinell laughed, her usual reserve gone. "Two down. They can't keep up." But Voss had not finished. A fresh wave of signals painted the Aurora's hull. Kalis's eyes narrowed at her tactical display. "He's firing missiles. 3, 4, no, 6 total. Incoming fast." Syrah cursed under her breath, hands flying over the controls. "Evasive pattern Delta, but they're tracking us too well." "Rhinell, now," Mason ordered, his voice unflinching. Rhinell tapped her pad, lips pressed tight. The market dump executed in a blink, an avalanche of data traffic, spoofed trades, and false signals. It wasn't a missile defense in any conventional sense, but Mason's plan didn't rely on tradition. Voss's targeting relays depended on market telemetry to cut through the asteroid interference, and suddenly that data was a blizzard of contradictions. The missile's guidance systems spasmed, their lock jittering and stuttering. "Got them," Rhinell confirmed, a fierce gleam in her eyes. Voss's network is chasing ghosts. Mason's final trick was already primed. Secondary thrusters, Sierra, short, erratic bursts, no pattern. The Aurora jerked forward, thrusters firing in wild staccato. To an outside observer, the ship appeared wounded, off balance, but Mason's plan was in the chaos. Voss's computers predicted their course and found only noise. The missiles veered wide, searching for a phantom. Now! Mason snapped. Sierra punched the drives. The Aurora surged ahead, the finish line a glimmer beyond the densest belt. Behind them, the missiles, confused, hunting, smashed into asteroids, detonating in violent, dazzling sprays. Voss's lead ship tried to match their maneuver, but was caught by the shockwave, spinning off course. On every channel, disbelief flooded the airwaves. The battered, discounted Aurora crossed the finish first, engines blazing, hull battered but unbroken. The crowd erupted in a storm of cheers and incredulous shouts. Voss's fleet limped in behind, battered, scattered, and humiliated. But Mason was not done. He keyed into the sector-wide broadcast, his image filling the displays of every watching vessel. In his hand was a data crystal, Voss's own encrypted orders and spy logs, evidence of sabotage and blackmail stretching back years. Mason's voice was measured, his words precise. These are the orders of Director Voss, proof of subterfuge, espionage, and attempted murder. The Commonwealth, the Syndicate, every house. Judge for yourselves. The feed flickered as Rennell pushed the files live. Across the system, the evidence played out in damning clarity. The reaction was immediate. Voss's supporters turned on him, the house's insignia flickering to "under review," his own security forces locking him from the command channel. In minutes, the director's downfall was not only assured, but complete. In the command lounge, the sisters gathered. The room hummed with victory, the tension of months unwinding in a single breathless wave. Lysara stood at the head of the table, her formal robe gleaming, her bearing regal, but her eyes soft as she regarded Mason. She drew herself up, voice clear and proud. "The council has decided. All authority is now yours, Mason." She set a data slate before him, the decree sealed with the marks of every house. It was not a contract. It was a coronation. Sierra leaned forward, her usual swagger softened with respect. "You taught me that speed is about daring, not just engines." Kalis's tone was gentler than Mason had ever heard. "You showed us that strength isn't only resistance, it's adaptation." Rynell smiled, her gaze lingering on Mason. "The greatest gambles bring the greatest gains. This is your victory, Mason, and ours." He looked at them, his partners, his family. The gratitude, respect, and affection in their eyes were more real than any contract could ever be. Later, after the cheers had faded and the ship had quieted, Lysara came to his quarters. She wore her hair loose, the crimson waves falling over her shoulders, the severe lines of her formal robes traded for soft silk that caught the light in ripples. She paused in the doorway, vulnerability open in her face for the first time. He set aside his work, heart thudding. She crossed the room to him, each step deliberate. "The contract is fulfilled," she said, voice trembling just enough for him to hear the emotion behind it. "The syndicate is safe. Your debt is gone. But the bond is not yet complete." She reached for him, fingers brushing his jaw, thumb tracing the line of his cheek. "I love you, Mason. Not for the contract. For you. We all do, each in our way. We're ready to be your wives in every sense." He drew her into his arms, feeling the tension melt away. Their lips met, slow at first, then deepening, hungry with the mingled taste of triumph and longing. The walls between them, duty, fear, the remnants of old wounds, fell away. In that moment, they became husband and wife in truth, not just in law. The bridge of the new flagship was quiet, a testament to Mason's blend of Terran and Verdani design. Sleek consoles, warm lighting, sweeping lines that evoked both strength and serenity. Every system pulsed with silent power, the result of two worlds unified. Through the wraparound viewport, the stars glimmered on a fleet that now bore both sigils, Verdani and Terran, side by side. No longer battered and desperate, the ships outside shone. New alloys, advanced drives, wings of unity. The Verdana-Terra alliance was flourishing, its influence stretching farther each day. Mason stood at the viewport, hands clasped behind his back, shoulders relaxed in a way they had not been for years. The reflection in the glass showed a man transformed, not a debtor, nor an exile, but a leader, a husband, and, more recently, a father. The lines at the corners of his eyes were softened by joy rather than exhaustion. Lysara entered, her footsteps a familiar rhythm on the polished deck. Warmth lit her golden eyes as she moved to his side, her hip brushing against his. Her presence was no longer a negotiation or a duty, but a promise freely given and fiercely kept. "A beautiful sight, isn't it?" she murmured, gazing at the glittering formation of ships beyond. Director Toval seeded the Orion route this morning. Rhinell's move spooked him. Mason's lips curved in a smile. "We would have beaten him anyway." Lysara echoed his smile, her gaze fond. "We," she repeated, savoring the word. She traced the faint, pale scar on his forearm, a relic of fire and risk, and the night their bond began in earnest. "You seem thoughtful, my love." He glanced at her, nostalgia softening his voice. "Just remembering. The old ship, the fear, the heat. How close we all came to losing everything." She laughed, her eyes sparkling with memory. "I'm grateful for it. Every moment brought us here." The doors slid open again, and Syrah strode in, flight suit gleaming with fresh insignia. Her energy filled the room, electric and irrepressible. "Don't get too comfortable, husband. I broke your slalom record again." Mason's laughter echoed, easy and unforced. "That's only because your suit cheats. I want a rematch, with equal upgrades." Syrah's grin was feral, her eyes bright with challenge. "You're on! Winner picks the next port." Their banter was a dance, full of mutual respect, and the sparks of old rivalry transformed into something far more intimate. Kalis arrived next, her entrance quiet but commanding. She wore the Navy of Fleet Command, her presence a steady anchor. "Perimeter's clear. Voss's last shell company is gone. He's finished," she reported, voice low and certain. She met Mason's gaze, her trust wordless but absolute, a bond forged in fire and unspoken loyalty. Rhinell followed, gliding in with a datapad cradled in her arms. Her eyes were sharp, mind always working. "Toval's concession gives us Orion. I've already reinvested in materials for your next engine project. We're always ahead, Mason." He nodded, pride swelling at the way they moved together, each a force, each a compliment. Lysara watched him, her expression softening as she took in the tableau of her sisters and husband. Not a council of rivals, but a family. "As satisfying as conquest is, my sisters," Lysara said, her voice gentle and amused. "It's time. He's awake." The words drew a hush. They left the bridge, moving as one through corridors lined with living crystal and steel. The family quarters, once a distant dream, were now reality, spacious, suffused with warmth, every detail designed for comfort and belonging. Laughter and conversation filled the air. At the heart of their home was the nursery, bathed in golden morning light that filtered through faceted glass. Mason entered first, his steps slowing as he approached the cradle. Inside, their son slept, small hands curled into fists. Kieran was perfect, a living bridge between worlds, with skin touched by soft green, pointed Verdani ears, a tumble of brown hair, and Mason's unmistakable gray eyes. The sight of him never failed to steal Mason's breath. Lysara slipped her arms around Mason's waist, her head resting on his shoulder. "He looks more like you every day," she whispered, her words threaded with awe and devotion. Mason's hand trembled as he reached down, lifting the child with gentle care. Kieran blinked awake, wide eyes fixing on his father, then his mother's. Sierra appeared at Mason's side, her usual bravado softened as she reached to tickle Kieran's tiny belly. The baby squealed, giggling, a clear, crystalline sound that melted the room's collective heart. Kalis moved closer, her hand coming to rest on Mason's back, solid and reassuring. "He's strong. Even Voss wouldn't dare challenge us now," she murmured, the words carrying both pride and a hint of protectiveness. Rhinell joined them, kneeling by the cradle, her datapad momentarily forgotten. She watched her brother with fascination and love, her analytical mind racing to catalog every trait, every possibility. Suddenly Kieran stilled, his playful laughter fading. His gaze grew distant, unfocused. The air itself seemed to vibrate with a resonance, low, soothing, more felt than heard. The sensation swept through the room, gentle but undeniable, a wave of peace that quieted every thought, softened every worry. Lysara's frown, a mother's instinctive concern, melted away, replaced by serenity. Mason felt the tension in his chest dissolve, his mind suddenly clear, present, and open. Even Sierra, who rarely sat still, relaxed, a look of wonder crossing her face. Kalis's eyes widened, awe coloring her voice. "The resonance," she whispered. "It's pure." Rhinell pressed a hand to her heart, her breath caught in her throat. "Our psionics were always chaotic, divided," she murmured, wonder giving way to realization. "But this is harmony. He's an empath, not a telepath. He unites us." The truth settled in the room like sunlight. Kieran's gift was not dominance or control, but connection, an emotional bond that brought calm and unity, bridging differences with effortless grace. The ancient Verdani lines, so long fractured by rivalry and tradition, found balance in this child's presence. Mason cradled his son, feeling a depth of love that defied words. He understood, in that moment, that his greatest contribution was not engineering or strategy. It was the heart he had brought to this family, the humanity that had opened new possibilities for them all. What Terran ingenuity had begun, Terran feeling had completed. His wives gathered close, Lysara's slender hand laced with his, Sierra's arm draped over his shoulder, Kalis's strength at his back, Rhinell's keen gaze softening as she knelt beside them. They were more than a dynasty now. They were a family, standing together at the threshold of a new future. Together they gazed at their son, a promise to the stars, a legacy built not from debt or conquest, but from love, hope, and unity. Their past burdens had been paid. What remained, the future they would build, was a gift they would gladly spend a lifetime creating, side by side. That's the end of the story. You can leave us a tip or become a channel member. This greatly helps our team improve the quality of our videos. You can send a tip using the Super Thanks button right below the video. We truly appreciate each and every one of you who has subscribed and supported us. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and write in the comments what you liked most about this story. Our team will be very grateful to you. You can find even more fascinating stories on our channel. See you in the next video.